England had its hottest summer on record this year, and the rest of the UK had its joint hottest. The Met Office says temperatures in England climbed higher this year than in any summer since 1910. Joined by Jim Bacon, the Managing Director of Weatherquest, which is a private forecasting and weather analysis company. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Hi. Talk to us about what a fantastic summer we've had.
Well, it was truly exceptional. And the fact that it's a neck-and-neck photo finish with 3 other years shows just how close we came to just getting the winning ticker tape. I think, actually, it's only 0.03 of a degree if you average it over the whole country, which is a tiny, tiny amount. So I'm sure if you looked at it regionally, as you mentioned, the Met Office figures for England do show that indeed was the warmest summer. So there are going to be differences, and I'm sure everybody around the country will have their memories of it. And in fact, if you extend it beyond what we normally use as the meteorological summer, which is June, July and August, if you add in some of the fine weather in May, you'll realise that some parts of the country did exceptionally well early on in the summer and not quite so well later on. Typically Wales, northwest England and so on did particularly well at the beginning. So these are the summers that I suspect we're going to think this is all jolly nice until you get to the end of it and you realise that also has its problems to do with water supply and shortages.
We don't seem to have had the same sort of water shortages as we saw with, hosepipe bans and that sort of thing previously. So I didn't know whether that meant that it wasn't as hot as some of the other years, but it would appear that I'm wrong.
Well, yes, it's a different. It's like almost comparing apples and oranges, really, because in the previous years, when we had that exceptional summer that everybody talks back about, 1976, that followed on from a dry winter the winter before, and in fact a dry summer before that in 1975. So the period that we built up the deficit of water was a much longer period. Now, up in northwest England and northwestern parts of Britain, where a lot of the water is stored in surface reservoirs and so on, you've got a much shorter period that you can use the water before you get to low levels. Now, down here in the southeastern side of the country, you do find that most of our water resource comes from deep underground aquifers, which means you've got a good year or so of storage before you start to put pressure on them. And I think that was the case this year. We had the benefit of the nice fine weather without the penalty of the drought. Now, if we go on to a similarly dry period of weather this winter and a dry period of weather next summer, I'm sure even in the southeast we'll have to look at things very critically again.
I'm guessing those reservoirs are like that because it rains more in the northwest, but I'm just speculating. I don't know. It's my part of the world, and it seemed to rain quite a lot when I was there. 1910 is when we say records began, but there were records before that, were there?
There were records before that. I seem to remember a long while ago when I worked back in my days in the Met Office. I think about 1753, they started recording rainfall at Kew. So there is a remarkably long period record going back there. But just in very localised places, these figures that we're talking about for this summer to do with the warmth are averaged over the whole of the country. So it includes, by very nature of an average over a big area, some of the cloudy corners around the hills and islands where the sunshine amounts won't have been quite so great and the temperature's a bit lower. So it's difficult to, I can't actually, despite my looks, I can't quite remember 1910's rainfall.
Global warming, is it an indicator that we're getting there?
Global warming is something that comes into this discussion frequently, and it's all quite a topical issue at the moment in not just the UK, but also in other parts of the world. So climate, although we think of climate as being a fixed thing that you compare things against as a benchmark, climate actually is always changing. Now, one of the things that we're seeing with the measurements, as opposed to just modelling results and predictions, the measurements show that it is actually warming, and in some parts of the world in a very dramatic way. So the polar regions tend to see bigger extremes. But you might think that whilst that is a long way away from us and we needn't worry over much about it. The fact that the polar patterns influence the global hemispheric wind regimes and how lows move across the big oceans, and also the ocean temperatures. If you melt a lot of ice, that cold water from the polar regions gets mixed into the other ocean waters. So it can affect the whole weather pattern on a global scale, even though the biggest issues are happening in these northern and southern latitudes.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure.